Hey everyone, it's Horror Free For All, and today I want to talk about what I want to see done in Final Destination 6. In case you haven't heard, Final Destination 6 is supposed to come out next year. There's two directors and the original writer of the first movie, Jeffrey Reddick, on board. I think Jeffrey Reddick also did some other scripts in the franchise as well. But the directors are Adam B. Stein and Zach Lipovsky, which had me hyped because Zach Lipovsky is another Goosebumps TV show alumni who are associated with this franchise. Same thing with AJ Cook. She was also in an episode of Goosebumps. She was the main character in Final Destination 2. So I'm hyped to see these two kind of make their stamp on the franchise, and I want to see the new direction that Jeffrey Reddick has planned. And from what we know, besides the directors and what we know of Jeffrey Reddick being attached to the franchise again, the premise for Final Destination 6 has me curious. The shakeup is supposed to be essentially around this. You have these EMT workers, emergency medical correspondents, right? They are the main characters witnessing these people that they come into contact with that have maybe survived a massive accident, and they are learning from their perspectives at least what these survivors are going through. And there's might be some stipulations associated with that maybe death might be coming after the EMT workers for helping them or something, right? That's all we can kind of speculate, and that's all we know or have been given to thus far. And for me, I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about this setup, but I am hopeful because they have confirmed that their intentions is to make a Final Destination movie. They want to make a movie that feels like the originals, but they want to put a fresh take on it, right? And I am not the kind of person that says that, every movie has to be the same formula. I'm a person that likes risks, but I only like risks when the rewards are worth it. You know what I mean? And this concept hasn't been proven yet, right? This is something completely different. I don't think any of the novels ever went this route. Maybe something similar, but definitely not to this extent, right? You're completely taking the narrative out of the survivor point of view, right? Now, I do want to see what that shakeup can entail. I do want to see what we can get out of it. But I do have a few things I want to see done. Given what we know and what we've been told, there are some things that I want to talk about. And I guess I'll bring up these first 5 movies here to kind of talk about, because for the most part, the first 5 movies, beginning, let's start with this one. The first movie pretty much sets up the whole core idea, right? A visionary sees the future in a vision. They save a few survivors that they happen to convince or reluctantly, have tag along with them. And the visionary learns throughout the movie about this design, that death itself, which may or may not be an entity or just a force of nature, has constructed. And this design is essentially a list that tries to pick off people in a particular order. In most of the movies, minus, I guess, Final Destination 2, it's the order they would have died in the accident. In Final Destination 2, they go in reverse order as a shakeup. But that's essentially the rudimentary formula of Final Destination, right? This movie sets that up, right? Final Destination 2, I guess we'll go there. It has probably, at this point of the franchise, since we don't have 6 yet, is the most envelope pushing. You have a survivor from the first movie coming back. They're from a whole separate list, but they're interacting with a new list that happens to be a leftover list that Death made of survivors that are linked to survivors from the first movie. Because these people survived the plane explosion of the first film, they set off a chain reaction with Death coming after them that saved a few lives, and they started to pile up, each individual person. So Death made a leftover list and tried to kill them all off in a traffic accident. But of course, they get saved, and now Death is trying to throw off the plan because this is a leftover list and there's some more stakes involved. But the concepts that this movie introduces are ways to defeat Death, ways to cheat Death even further, more permanently. You know, the core concept that the first movie also laid out as well is that you have to essentially look for signs. And these signs can be kind of prophetic, they can be symbolic, they could be hallucinations, whatever the case may be. And they play a role in whether the group can find out, you know, what's going to happen to the person. And they also have to go through this whole rigmarole of finding the order based on the visionary's vision of what they witnessed and who died first and all that. There's a lot to keep up with. But Final Destination 2 tries to add in that if new life gets introduced through a survivor on the list, whether they give birth or maybe they father a child, that unexpected life will negate the list. Or if a survivor dies and then comes back to life, that takes a person off the list, making the list null and void. And that concept was actually fleshed out in the novels, right? So there's some new ideas there, right? And to kind of jump off from here, the first thing I want to see done in this new Final Destination 6 is them trying to build a new idea based, not just the concept and the setup, but I want a new idea, a fresh spin. And one thing I kind of want to tie back to the first film here is there's a specific death in the franchise that causes a lot of consternation within the fandom. And it's the death of Todd in the first movie. He was the first person that death came after in the whole franchise, after he survived, you know, the tragic catastrophe. But in Todd's case, death was pretty much an entity that you could feel. You can feel its presence in the bathroom where Todd ended up dying. He died from a freak accident. He slipped on some water, and he had this shower thing wrapped around his neck, and it choked him to death. But we see shots of death pulling water from under a toilet and spreading it across the floor. And then after Todd died, death swept the water back under the toilet, right? That's the first thing I want to see kind of done. Instead of going this new concept like Final Destination 2 went down of like how to defeat death, just make death's entity feel there. You know, you feel it. Every death sequence or set of circumstances that you normally would see in every other death of the franchise beforehand, instead, you know, in the sixth movie, have it to where when these things are being set up, you know death is there. Death is lurking there. You feel its presence. That's what I'm getting at. I think that will kind of set a new tone for the movies moving forward if they want to go the whole route of maybe making a seventh or eighth installment. This would be a fun little shake-up to add in there, right? Now, we're kind of moving on, because I kind of have some ideas based off other movies in the franchise as well. Final Destination 3, right? Final Destination 3, unfortunately, doesn't really do anything new besides introduce a new concept of how the visionary sees signs. You know, in the first two movies, like I said, it was more like prophetic or hallucinations or symbolic. They'll see, like for example, in Final Destination 2, there's a sign where a guy opens the closet and he sees a shadow of like a puppet with hooks. And he's like, that must mean that there's a hook hand or something, right? Somebody with hook hands is going to kill the next person, right? That's essentially the concept, right? You have these weird, random situations that set up these signs. But in Final Destination 3, the girl, she took photographs before the big, catastrophe event that she, had a vision for. And those photos that she saved throughout the film, she looks back, and the photos itself have predicted the future, right? What I want to see done, the second thing I want to see done, is more things tied with the vision itself, right? What makes the opening sequences usually compelling is that these clairvoyants and visionaries have tapped into the future, right? There's some sort of time element that they're able to kind of influx. And when you think in the grand scheme of what death is doing in these movies traditionally, is that it's correcting the real timeline that was supposed to happen. There's a timeline, and fate is a part of that timeline. And when you go against fate, there's other movies that have come to talk about this, right? Where no matter what you try to do to change the future, the universe is going to try to correct itself, right? So with the case of the visionary Wendy from Final Destination 3, her photos captured the future, right? So I think the element there is, it's always been prevalent in the movies, but what I'm trying to get at is the signs should be more prophetic in nature. They should be more predicting the future. They should be more interpretive. I do like, some in-the-moment signs, but I think that kind of clouds some movies because it just comes off random. I think something concrete, like a girl taking photographs of something, and there's little hints and clues in the signs of the photos that predict the future. Something like that, or maybe you can go the whole route of maybe somebody was just typing away on a blog or typing something cryptic or something. Who knows, right? But the point is, that's what I want to see. I want to see more prophetic signs, and less random feeling ones. I want something with tangibility there. Now, Final Destination 4 actually has something that reminds me of something I want to see done in Final Destination 6. This movie is easily the worst movie of the franchise. I really have nothing else to say about it. But there is something that is done here that I think was very well utilized. And that was because they thought at the time it was going to be the final movie. They threw in two separate major cataclysmic visions in the movie. One in the beginning and one kind of in the middle. And they both set up two distinct acts of the movie. While it's unfortunate that this movie is the one they had that idea, that's the third thing I want to see done in Final Destination 6. What I think would be a fun idea is that the first half is these EMTs are helping these survivors. They're not a part of this original list. They're only witnessing the aftermath of this list. Maybe we get to see bits and pieces of it. Maybe they're at some sporting event and these EMTs are witnessing these people leave the stadium or something, whatever the case may be. And they see this visionary losing their mind and all that. That's the first half. But the second half, you set up a complete new list with these EMTs. These EMTs and maybe these survivors from the stadium accident get roped into a brand new list. And you have two separate vision sequences in the movie. Maybe not the direct first-person perspective in the first one, but you'll get that first-person perspective of like an EMT in the second half. I want some semblance of continuity with the formula, but I do want that shake-up there. But I think that using that from 4 is a great starting place, right? So something like that, or something of that nature. Which brings me to the 5th movie, Final Destination 5. Now, this movie did introduce new concepts. Like I've already touched on, that Final Destination 2 brought in, if you bring a new life into the equation, it can negate the list. If you die and get brought back from the dead, you also can negate the list. But here, there's a concept that I think is really, really cool, and I don't think was done in the novels or in the comics or anything. And the concept is that you can borrow somebody's lifespan if you're on a list, for example, and death is after you. You can replace yourself with a person that's going to die at some point anyway. And what you do is you end up taking their lifespan, however long it may be, until death would have come after them, and you'll be safe for a time being. I think that's a really cool concept, and a lot of fans will say that that's probably the best concept they've introduced in the films. And while, unfortunately, it's not like a concept like how in Final Destination 2 they had, if you die and get brought back to life, you can negate the list. That was actually fleshed on more so in, I think, 1 or 2 of the novels. So that concept, for the most part, is canon until Final Destination 3 retconned it. But that kind of leads me into, I guess, the fourth thing I want to see done. And that is mainly just when you have a concept like you can borrow somebody's lifespan, I want to see more of that fleshed out specifically, but I also wouldn't mind seeing maybe if you die and come back to life, you get to negate the list or something. One of these old concepts that were good, I want to see brought back, or you can literally add a new twist to how to defeat death itself. I think what shakes the movies up, at least in the former movies, is that you had that shake-up every once in a while. You know, there's really only two movies that offer a shake-up, like a true shake-up to how death operates. But I want to see either one of the former ones or a new one, and I want to see it more expounded on. I want to see more mythos built on how death operates. I want a more finite answer to what death is. Like I said, I've already brought up, I want to see death as an entity, first and foremost. But if you make death as an entity, there has to be some strengths and weaknesses to defeat death, right? And making death an invisible yet present villain is cool, right? So that kind of ties in with my first one, right? And tying it all together, right? So we have, you know, I want to see death as an entity. I want to see the signs more prophetic. I want to see them more tangible and more realistic and less random. I want to see two distinct vision sequences in the film, and I want to see some fleshed out concepts on how to defeat death. But the fifth thing I want to see, all right, this is the last thing, and this is a general statement that goes into every Final Destination movie, right? I want to see elaborate setups to these deaths, right? Part of the problem that some of these movies have is that some deaths are just so quick, it's for shock value. And maybe not every single death needs to be set up elaborately. But when I'm thinking about elaborate, I'm thinking like, have you ever read those old I Spy books? And you see the level of detail they went into picking certain items that look similar to something else to kind of throw you off the scent of what item you're actually looking for. And how well done those setups were and the photographs were taken. They put a lot of time and effort into that. But I think that when I say I want to see elaborate setups to these deaths, I want to see logical, not over the top and ridiculous setups, but logical, realistic things that add up, that make sense, right? And yeah, when I'm saying over the top, that's a fine line because the execution could be over the top, but the concept itself could be more logical, right? And that's not to say that there aren't some things in the former movies that you have illogical concepts with these death setups, but the deaths itself, at least the execution, comes off logical if a certain item, you know, impacts a certain part of the body, let's just say. It seems like that would happen, right? And we can go all day going back and forth, but you need to build tension. That's the main thing you want to get across with these elaborate setups. You build tension. Like, when I say tension, I'm talking about the teacher's death in the first movie. You have this uncertainty. You have all these possibilities that can come out of the equation, but you get a certain result. But the viewer's on the ride. Same thing goes with the fire escape death in Final Destination 2. The whole build-up. There's uncertainty. There's a garbage disposal. There's fire. There's something at the bottom of a ladder. How's he going to die? Right? I don't want just some clear-cut, you know, this is going to happen kind of death, right? I want these death sequences to constantly build tension. And at the same time, I do want them to have fun with it. I don't want them just to do boring deaths and stuff like that, you know. Don't make it boring, but make it fun, right? And that's all I'm asking for. And I guess in the whole package, I think if you want to put a little star asterisk, this will be kind of a 6. Look at the first movie and the third movie. Look at these characters. Look at how they were characterized. Make these characters less cardboardy that some of the movies have. Focus on the plot. Like if you look at each film's individual strengths, you know, Final Destination 2 has easily the best ideas and concepts for the franchise. Maybe not the best written plot. maybe not the best paced movie, maybe not the best packaged film. And you know, look at 1 and 3. They might be basic, they might be kind of hiccups of the ideas, but they have good solid casts, good solid characters, and they have solid tension building, and you feel for these characters as the story goes along. Final Destination 5, you might not care about these characters as much, but the plot is there. You have a really distinct and easy to follow plot, and it sticks out for that, right? And then you have Final Destination 4. As long as you're not Final Destination 4, you're fine. But to give some credit to Final Destination 4, there is some stakes, right? There's some gradual elevated stakes that film has managed to do better, I guess, than some other of the films, maybe of all of them. And that's one compliment I thought I'd never give it, but it does build up to something grand, right? You feel that grand final act. There's a grand final act, right? And it's over the top, but in not in the bad context, but in like you're going above and beyond for the audience, right? So putting all that together, Final Destination's plot building, Final Destination 1 and 3's characters or character types, Final Destination 2, go with that cool concept and work towards that bombastic, final act that Final Destination 4 has. Build up to something great. And that's pretty much all I want to see done in Final Destination 6. So, yeah, that's all I have to say. Let me know down in the comment section. What do you want to see done in Final Destination 6? What are some things that you want to see the movie do? Maybe there's some concepts completely different that you want to see done or maybe experimented with. I'm so down to talk about this and discuss it because I'm a massive Final Destination fan, and I hope that a lot of you out there that maybe decide to comment are as well. So, yeah, let me know. I'm dying to hear from you, and I'll see you next time.